I spent 28 long years working underground, pulling coal out of the cold, dark earth with these calloused hands of mine, and eating whatever scraps came my way that didn't finish me off before the shift ended. That was simply how life went back then. No fancy choices, no big debates about it. My dear wife, she worked as a nutritionist for 40 full years, always trying her best to straighten me out and fix the mess I'd made of my body. Well, in the end, I outlived her too. I don't rightly know why the good Lord let that happen. But here I am now. I want to be straight with you from the very beginning. I never grew up picking and choosing what ended up on my plate like some folks do today. Down in those mines, whatever showed up in your lunch pail at the start of the shift, that's exactly what you ate. No questions asked. There wasn't any other way around it. Most days it was cheap food that cost less than $1. Nothing special, nothing tracked or measured. Nobody down there was counting calories or worrying about macros. We were all just hoping and praying. We'd make it back up to the surface when the whistle blew, maybe catch a few precious minutes of sunlight on the walk back to the car before heading home exhausted. I did that hard, dusty work for 28 years straight. When I finally retired and came up for good, my lungs rattled and growled like an old diesel engine struggling to turn over on a freezing winter morning. And then, with me suddenly home all the time, my wife, God bless her soul, it was like she had spent her entire career preparing for this very moment. Every single morning without fail, she'd place a tall glass of something in front of me. Vitamins, minerals, mysterious colored drinks whose names I couldn't even begin to pronounce properly. I'd look at that glass, and to be completely honest with you, I'd pretend to sip it, then quietly dump it down the sink when she wasn't looking, and go fix myself a strong cup of coffee instead. My wife really was an incredibly knowledgeable woman. She knew more about how the human body works than anyone else I ever met in my long life. She had stacks of books, official certifications hanging on the wall, and clients who swore by her advice like it was gospel. She used to look me in the eye and say with all the patience in the world, "If you would just listen to me, Clarence, we could celebrate your 80th birthday together, healthy and happy." I never really listened the way she wanted. I nodded. I smiled, but I never changed. Yet somehow, we did celebrate that 80th birthday together. It turned out to be one of the very last birthdays we got to share. I'm 102 years old now. Can you even believe a number like that? A couple of years back, my doctor called me in for one of those mandatory checkups. He ran all the usual tests, flipped through my thick file, and then he smiled. Real wide. He leaned in closer across his desk and said, "Mr. Clarence, you've got to share your secret with me." I told him straight, and he laughed harder than I expected any doctor to laugh. But before I get into all that with the doctor, I need to tell you about my old friend George first. Because some things in this life, no matter how hard you try, or how careful you are, you just can't change the final outcome. George was my closest friend for 34 solid years. He was the kind of man you don't come across twice in one lifetime. Steady, reliable, the real deal. He didn't smoke, didn't drink, went out for a run every single morning, rain or shine. He tracked every number in a little notebook he carried everywhere, had most of them memorized cold, could rattle them off like they were his own phone number. The way he used to look at whatever I was eating on our days off together, I still can't quite describe it. He genuinely felt sorry for me and the way I lived. Me? I genuinely didn't mind it one bit. It was all in good fun between old friends. This was sometime during our retirement years. I can't give you an exact date anymore. I'm too old to keep perfect track of those things now. One ordinary afternoon, a truck driver ran a red light and slammed in George's car on the left side. I stood there at his graveside in the pouring rain that day, water running down my face, and I just couldn't make any sense of it. The most solid, careful man I had ever known in my life, gone in a single instant because somebody else wasn't paying attention for just a few seconds. I've been thinking about that good man for nearly 40 years now. I keep coming back to the same painful truth over and over again. George spent his entire life doing everything right, protecting his body from every danger he could see coming down the road. Yet nobody, not all his discipline, not all his careful planning, could protect him from the one thing that actually did come for him. That day didn't make me careless or reckless, but it did make me honest with myself in a way I hadn't been before. There are forces in this life that no amount of perfect discipline or planning can negotiate with. You can eat the cleanest food on earth. You can work out 5 hours a day if you want. And still, you might get a diagnosis that doesn't care one bit about how clean your plate stayed or how many steps you counted. I'm not saying you shouldn't take care of yourself. That's not what I'm talking about here at all. I'm just saying that story so many people keep telling themselves. If I do everything exactly right, I'll stay safe forever. Well, that story has a hole in it. I found that hole standing in the rain at George's grave, and I have never forgotten it since now. My wife, Eleanor. I want to speak about her carefully, because she deserves so much more than to be reduced to any kind of punchline. Even if she would have rolled her eyes and hated hearing me say something like that. There's one thing I never told her while she was still here that I probably should have. The way she came into my life felt too perfectly timed to be pure accident. I grew up in a crowded house where my mother stretched every little bit of food across 6 hungry kids. A good week meant we got potatoes 3 nights instead of just 2. Nobody in our world had ever even heard the word nutrition used in a sentence that actually applied to them. I spent the first 30 years of my life eating whatever kept me on my feet and working hard. Then somehow, like the universe decided, I needed a big correction I never asked for. I married a woman whose entire career was built around solving exactly the kind of problems I represented. I used to joke that I was her most difficult case. She never laughed at that joke. I think it hit too close to the truth for her. She stayed patient with me for 40 long years. She really did. She would set something healthy in front of me, explain in detail why it mattered for my heart, my lungs, my blood, and I would listen politely, nod my head, and then quietly go right on doing what I'd always done. Not one single change. She called me the most stubborn patient she never officially had on her books. And I called myself a man who simply knew what he liked. Every single day of her professional life carried real weight for her. If someone followed her advice and things still went wrong, she carried that pain deeply. She tracked every outcome, updated her methods constantly, lost sleep over cases that most people would have walked away from. She cared in a way that truly cost her something inside. I understand that better now than I ever did back then. At 81, her heart finally gave out and she left me here on my own. The deep irony of that moment was not lost on me at all. I say this without any kind of satisfaction, because she knew more about heart health than her own cardiologist, and yet it still happened. What wore Eleanor down in the end wasn't ignorance. It was the heavy burden of knowing too much and feeling responsible for trying to fix everything she saw. Every morning, even now, I think about her. I miss those quiet days when she would sigh at my plain old coffee cup, shake her head with that familiar look, and then pour one for herself anyway, so we could sit together. So let me tell you how the doctor reacted, because his reaction mattered just as much as any answer I gave him. He sat there going through all my test results, blood pressure, heart function, the whole works. He kept flipping back and forth between papers like he was searching for some mistake that would explain everything. Finally, he looked up at me and said, "Mr. Clarence, I've gone through every single page here just to make sure these numbers really belong to you. These are not the numbers I expect to see on a man your age. What is your secret? Is there something special you eat or drink every single day?" I looked him right in the eye and told him, "Doc, I never once woke up in the morning and went to war with my own body. I ate what I had available. I ate what I grew, or what was put in front of me. I drank clean water. I drank my coffee. And, on some cold nights, sometimes a little something stronger to warm the bones. But I never laid awake at night, convinced I was going to die, because I ate the wrong thing at lunch." He started writing something down. Then, just to see his face, I added with a little grin, "And I never drank any of those strange green mixtures my wife used to blend up at 6 in the morning that looked like something you'd find at the bottom of a muddy pond." He laughed out loud, and that big laugh is what started this whole conversation we're having now. Look, I'm not sitting here telling you that diet doesn't matter at all. I'm not telling you to ignore your doctor or throw away your vitamins. Tonight, I would never say something that foolish. But don't ever forget this important truth. There's a kind of fear that sneaks inside a person and dresses itself up as smart health consciousness. I saw it in my wife. I saw it in my best friend, George. I saw it in my old boss and in plenty of other good people over the years. It shows up in different ways, but it's the same thing underneath. It's not exactly the fear of bad food itself. It's the fear of that red warning flag that appears on the paper when your numbers start climbing too high. And while you're busy patting yourself on the back for living so carefully, that hidden fear is quietly eating away at you from the inside. You don't even notice it happening until it's already done its work. After all these many years, I'll tell you the one thing I know for certain. The worst thing you can possibly do to yourself isn't eating the wrong foods or skipping workouts. Now and then, George knew every single variable you could track, and the end still came for him anyway. Eleanor studied every variable deeply, and it still came for her. I knew almost none of them, and yet here I sit at 102 years. Old, still talking to you today. You've got to find the right balance in this life. You really do. You can't age well by eating perfectly all the time, and you can't age well by eating completely wrong either. It just doesn't work that simple. Enjoying your life, finding joy in the ordinary days, loving the people around. Those things are just as powerful medicine for the human body as eating right. I truly believe that with all my heart. Now, if Eleanor were still sitting here beside me, she'd probably be furious with me for saying all this out loud. I know that because in her mind, everything always came down to proper nutrition. In her eyes, I was just an ignorant old miner who didn't understand. Maybe she was right about some of it. I don't know. But I'm not here as proof that ignorance wins. I'm just a living reminder that fear doesn't protect you nearly as well as it promises it will. Live carefully if that feels right to you. There's nothing wrong with being thoughtful. But don't let being careful become the entire point of your existence. Don't let managing and worrying about your body crowd out the actual beautiful experience of being fully alive inside it. Because once you make that trade, it's one you can never undo. That was the only part that made my doctor go completely quiet. Not the joke about Eleanor's green drinks that made him laugh. The quiet came when I told him I had spent 102 years refusing to be afraid of simply being alive. If George were still here, he would have had something sharp and smart to say about everything I just shared. He always did. I would tell you exactly what it would be, but after he went quiet one morning, I stopped speaking for him. That's all I've got for today, friends. Thank you for listening to An Old Man's Stories.